This afternoon, we are coming to you live from our Burnley campus. Our Burnley campus has been the centre of teaching and research in urban horticultural science since 1891. The campus has an expanding profile in green infrastructure and focuses on sustainability and climate change, and is home to the beautiful heritage-listed Burnley Gardens. So how this afternoon will work, Iliana will be giving a 30-minute presentation about her work, and then we will be taking questions from the audience and aim to finish up at 3 o'clock. So to ask a question and also to respond to polls, make a comment in the chat, and there's also a Q&A function that you can put your questions in. We welcome all comments, but please, of course, be respectful. Now, before I pass over, we do want to make sure that everything is working online. So please, everyone out there, let us know, open up the comments chat and let us know where you are Zooming in from. Where are you joining from? If you're part of a school group, let us know which school you're coming from as well. It'd be great to hear from you. In the past, we've done these events over a number of years, and there's been people from all over the world, so it's really nice to see where everyone's coming in from. We've got sunny Melbourne, of course. It is a beautiful day today. That's great to hear. Parkville, lots of other places. Keep putting it in the chat. Wurundjeri homeschoolers, that's wonderful. All right, well, welcome everyone. Keep putting that into the chat. And while we keep seeing that continue to come in, I will hand over to you, Iliana, so you can get started. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. Hello, everyone. Awesome to be here with you all. Thank you for joining us. I would like also to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I am today, the Wurundjeri land of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. So yes, today we're going to talk about animal architecture. Sorry, I already started that wrong. Can I go to my first slide? Okay. This was supposed to play after my first slide, but that's okay. So yes, we're here to talk about animal architecture. I don't know how many of you know, but most animals are builders. So most animals build some type of construction that is essential for their survival or their reproduction. And this includes spiders building spider webs, or beavers building their dams, or caddisflies with their cases or nests. So fish build nests, mammals build nests, there's lots of insects, amphibians build nests, and of course birds build nests as well. And of all those animal constructions, the ones that I find the most fascinating, because they are intricate, because they are diverse, is bird nests. And I don't know how many of you have had the time to contemplate a bird building a nest. So that's what's happening in this video, which I might try to play again. So what you see here is a little willy wagtail that it's building its nest. So it's a female, and it's bringing spider webs. It's trying to move its legs to get the right size and essentially to make a good environment for eggs and chicks. And to me, this is a completely remarkable and fascinating behavior. So this bird is 20 grams, maybe less, and of course it has a tiny, tiny little brain. But it's able to do this. It's able to build this nest all springs. You know, this is happening everywhere. And they can spend days, and in some species they can spend actually weeks building a nest. And then, of course, what will happen is that after the nest is constructed, then they will lay their eggs, and then eventually the eggs will hatch, and then we will have chicks. And you know, to me, this is absolutely a beautiful image, and I invite you all to try to enjoy it and contemplate this you know, wonder of nature this spring. So yes, today I'm gonna talk about nests, and I'm gonna talk about the wonder of nests. So nests are a huge endeavor for many animals. They take time to build, they take energy to build, and it is completely logical that it means such an effort for animals to build, because these nests actually contain the most important thing for animals, right? Contain all the babies. And quite literally, these vessels are holding the future of the generations of these populations. So they are absolutely fundamental structure for reproduction in many species. And it has been suggested that this capacity of building a nest is actually a key innovation. So this means that is an important change that occurred through evolution that made birds super successful. And I love thinking about this idea. So this means that before animals had the capacity to build something, they were forced to lay their eggs on the ground or just use crevices or just use holes in trees that were already constructed, right? But then through millions of years, this behavior, this capacity of building something evolved. And then this opened a range of possibilities for these animals. So they were not anymore confined to laying their eggs on the ground or in crevices or in holes. But now they could build something anywhere that they wanted. And this capacity of building something is suggested to be behind the huge diversity of birds that we see today. So very important, superpower that evolved. And today, I would like to convince you that this capacity to build a nest could actually be really important if we start thinking about what is happening with our world and our changing climate. So that's the story of today. Before I dive into that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. So I am from Colombia, which is this green dot here. And I did my master's there. I worked with poison frogs, and I have had the chance to work with many other animals, with lizards, with birds, with insects. And I've had the amazing fortune to travel around the world with studying these organisms. And somehow I ended up here in Australia in 2012 to do my PhD in Canberra. And I started working with birds. So this bird that you see here, the little one, it's a yellow-rumped thornbill. It is host of what we call a brood parasite, which is the big bird that you see there. So this little thornbill is parasitized by this big bird, the cuckoo, the shining bronze cuckoo, and this bird lays eggs in the nest of this little thornbill. And for my PhD, what I had to do was check the nests of this little bird and check if they had been parasitized. So this is called brood parasitism. It's a whole other topic for a masterclass. It's fascinating and awesome, but today I'm gonna talk about the nest. So when I was doing my PhD, I had to check these nests, and it was in late July, early August in Canberra, which is really, really cold if you have ever been to Canberra around those times. And I had to put my hands inside these nests. And I was completely amazed because these nests were really, really warm inside. They were fluffy, they were beautifully constructed, and they were very, very warm. And that's when I realized that I would love to find out more about nests in general and how animals are able to build something like that. And that's how I ended up studying nests. So birds have an incredible diversity of nest designs. This is just some of those examples. And I wanted to ask you a question and make you think for a second. Why do you think that some of these nests that you see here in this image, why do those have a roof? So you can see the top three nests, they have all a roof, they are covered. And the nests on the bottom, they are completely open. And I think there's a poll that is opening right now. And where I ask you, why do you think that some nests have a roof and others don't? Why do some species build that roof? I think we have answers, coming now.
Yeah, everyone's just submitting their responses now.
Awesome. So we'll wait a little bit to get more answers. And of course, this is just what you think, right? So you probably don't know the answer yet. But yeah, just want to know why you think that these nests have a roof.
Looks like everyone's deliberating a lot. So the three options were whether they can protect them from the sun, is that right? Or protect them from predators. I believe there was an all of the above as well. So everyone's just still submitting that now, and it should be coming up in a second. Okay, we got it. Okay, so 89% said all of the above. There was 9% protect from predators and 2% from the scorching sun.
Yeah, very interesting. Cool. So you'll be surprised by the answer, I think. Yes, so the biggest question, well, the biggest more general answer is that we actually don't know for sure. So this is something that we've been trying to find out in the last years to try to understand why some nests have a roof. And the interesting thing about this is that around 30% of the birds build that roof. So independently, this action, this behavior of building a roof on their nest has evolved multiple times. And we've been trying to understand why. What we know, the evidence so far is telling us that it is not predation. So in general, the experiments have shown that nests that have a roof, they are not less likely to be predated. In fact, in some experiments, they have been predated on more. So there's more animals that eat these nests simply because they tend to be bigger as well. So predation was not the answer. Then we are left with protection from the cold and protection from the sun. And these are really two good options, and I will show you a little bit of what we've done in our group at UniMelb to try to answer this big question and reveal sort of the general answer. So this research that you're seeing now on the slides is a product of the PhD of one of our students in the group, of Sylvia. And Sylvia was trying to understand how climate is related to the traits of the nests of different birds. And she was studying this beautiful group of birds called tanagers. They actually have a neotropical distribution, so they are not found in Australia, but they are found in the Americas. And they are a really interesting group to study because there's a lot of variation in the type of nests that they build. So they have some species that build nests with a roof, other species that build open nests, and then there's variation as well in the measurements of their nests, right? So there's some species that have super thick walls, then some that have really flimsy walls, some that have thick roofs. So there's a lot of variation in how these nests look like, which makes it ideal to try to understand the reasons behind that variation. And Sylvia went to different museums trying to measure these nests, so collect a bunch of different measurements from nests in nest collections. I don't know how many of you knew, but in museums they often have nest collections. And she tried to link these measurements that she was taking with climatic measurements of where the nest had been found. So essentially trying to connect the architecture of the nest with the climate where it was found to see if we could find any patterns and any links. And she actually found some interesting patterns in the data. So she found, for example, that in places where the precipitation, so the rain was very heavy and very, very heavy rainy places, the thickness of the walls of the nests were thinner. So thin walls in very wet places, while in drier places, the walls were much, much thicker. So there was this pattern, different species, where if the nest was built in a wet place, in a rainy place, the wall would be very thin. And we think that the reason for that is that humidity inside the nest is not a very good thing for the development of the eggs. So if the nest is too wet inside, that means that there could be bacterial degradation or just higher risk of getting, fungal infections and things like that. So ideally, the nest should be a semi-dry environment. So having a dry nest is important in a rainy place. And it is very hard to dry a nest if the walls are very thick. So thin walls, we think it's linked with rainy places because they would allow the nest to dry much faster. So that's the explanation that we have for this interesting pattern. And then Sylvia also found a link with wind. And in windy places, the cap of the nest is deeper. So that means you can imagine how if you have a very flat nest and there's a lots of wind, then the eggs might be dislodged from the nest. So a deep cap would make sense in places that are very windy. So these are just a couple of examples of the links that Sylvia found. So there's very specific nest traits that are linked to the climate of where the species is building, which is telling us that somehow, there is evolution happening and selection in places that are, climate is driving the evolution of the nest traits at this very small scale. And then at a much larger scale, we have something similar. So remember that I asked you in that poll why you thought that some birds build a roof. So in this group, we had some species that built that nest that had a roof, the domed nest, and some species that built an open nest. And what Sylvia found was that those species that had a roof in this group of birds, they were actually in very arid environments that had very high radiation, very high temperatures. So in this specific case, that roof actually was protecting the eggs from the sun. And this is actually a hypothesis that we have for Australian birds as well, where we see that in Australia, those birds that build nests with a roof are often found in arid environments as well. So it seems like radiation could be one of the main drivers and main responsibles for species building a roof on their nests, essentially. But again, all this is pointing to the fact that climate is actually linked to nest architecture, right? So birds have been evolving this behavior and building their nests in a certain way, and climate is very related to that and those decisions that have been made. Another thing that we studied when we were looking at this and this question of nest traits was how long a nest how long a species would take to build nests of different types. So we collected information on the average number of days that a species would take to build a domed nest or an open nest. And these are all the points that you see in this plot. So each of those points is actually a species for which there was data on that. And what you see there is that in all of the categories, so on the x-axis we have whether the nest was built by both males and females, or just females or just males. But in the main two categories, you can see that building a domed nest actually takes longer. And building an open nest takes less time. So this fits with the idea that it just more investment of time to build a domed nest. It takes longer, but it could be, protecting from extreme situations. In males, we found the opposite pattern, but actually there was no difference between building open and domed nests. We just found that males build nests really quickly, and that it takes a lot longer to build a nest if you're in a couple than if you are on your own, which is against what we imagine. You would think that building something together would take less time, but it's not the case. It actually takes longer to build something together, males and females. We don't know the answer to why that's the case. But for males, we have an idea of why they take so little to build, and the reason is that a lot of species of birds use, or not a lot, sorry, but in most of the species that were male built, the male builds, they actually attract females by building nests. So this house wren, that is the photo that you see there, that house wren builds lots of nests during the breeding season, and the female assesses the quality of the male depending on how many nests they build. So it's an indication of how good the territory of the male is, and in general, how good that male is. So they try and build lots of nests to attract the females, which explains why they would take so little to build each nest. So this is just to say that domed nests actually take longer to be constructed. Now, I have another question for you. So we're gonna switch a little bit the topic now, and I wanna ask you, you have 3 images of 3 nests there. I wanna ask you, which of those nests are built by the same species?
Okay, the polls come up. So we've got, first one is nest A and B. The next one is nest B and C. The next one is all three. And the fourth one is all were built by different species.
Yes.
Lots of different options. And I don't know what my answer is. I'm going to put one in. See how you go. So everyone submit all your responses, and we'll be bringing the poll up in a second to see how everyone goes.
Yes, cool, awesome.
Make sure we get out of the way. I can see the middle one's a little bit different, but maybe
it's a trick question.
Maybe it is a trick question. All right, so the answers are up. Oh, a bit more varied this time. Last time we were a bit more focused on one. Okay, so the top answer is nest B and C, built by the same species, or nest A, B, and C was also quite popular, or all were built by different species. We don't know. We don't know. Let us know.
Cool, interesting. So I thought people were going to say A and C were built by the same species. But yeah, so I think a lot of you got the right answer. And the whole point of this next bit of the talk, which is these were actually built all by the same species in the same place. So they were all built in the same, nature reserve in Canberra. These are nests from the yellow rump thornbill, so that nest that I told you that I worked with during my PhD. But the amazing thing, and what I want to highlight here and sort of make you think about, is that they look very different, these nests, but they are all from the same species. So sometimes you might think that a nest is just the same recipe and every individual from the same species is doing exactly the same thing. And that's what people used to think centuries ago about nest building. But these days we have a much better idea, and we know that that's not the case, right? So there's flexibility in this behavior of nest building, and there's decisions that the individuals are making when they build their nests. And that's what we are studying as well in our group. So these are all built by different thornbills, and you can see that some use flowers to decorate the nest, which makes them hide much better. The entrance as well, so the entrance you can see here and there. You can see the entrance very well. For this one, the entrance is down there. It's actually very, very difficult to find the entrance in that nest. This is another example of variation in the same species. So this is the weevil. This is the smallest bird in Australia. And you can see, generally they have the same shape, but actually they look very different, these two nests, and they were built by different individuals, again, in the same place. So one of them is much more round, and the other one is more elongated. And then this is another example. This is superb fairy wrens. So for those of you in Australia, you might have seen this bird in your backyard. It's a very popular, beautiful bird, the fairy wren, where the female builds nests. And they can build nests that look very different. Even the same female can build nests that look very different through the season. And there's variation in the size of the nest, in the entrance size, as well in the position of that entrance. So they are not exactly the same, the nests, even though they are all from the same species. And this is the other thing that we've been looking at. So we've been trying to understand why there is variation within the same species and to what capacity an individual bird is able to change the design of its nest. And superb fairy wrens, they are actually really good study species because they have long breeding seasons. So in Canberra, for example, they would start building the nest around September, and they would end the breeding season in January, where it's much, much warmer than in September. So there is a very large gradient of temperatures during the breeding season. And superb fairy wrens are also able to build multiple nests in the same season. So if their nest gets predated, or if the eggs hatch and they are successful, then they can build another nest. And we've been collecting information on these nests through the season and measuring them and trying to understand and explore whether there are differences in the nests that are built early in the season, where it's very cold, compared to the nests that are built later in the season, where it's much, much warmer. And this is just preliminary data. But this is just to show you that there are trends, right? So there is a tendency in these species, for example, to change the width of the nest. And the nests that we've collected in September, they are actually bigger, they are larger, they are wider as well, compared to the nests that we've collected in January. And this happens for a lot of different measures, so I just put an example here. But essentially, the nests that they are building in summer are smaller nests. And we want to understand now what difference does this make to the birds. So one possibility is that they are building smaller nests simply because they are more tired, there is not enough energy at the end of the breeding season, so they are just building a smaller nest. But the other possibility is that in summer, these nests might actually work well. So they might have thinner walls and allow more air to come in, or on the opposite side, bigger nests in winter are actually really important to keep good insulation for the eggs and the chicks when it's really cold. So we're trying to explore this question more, but it's really exciting to see that their birds have this capacity to change the design through the season in a very short amount of time. And of course, this links to the broader idea of how important constructions might be in a changing climate. So this that I'm telling you today is related to birds, but you can think about it for any other animal construction. It's a key question that we need to answer, right? How are these constructions going to change if the climate is changing really rapidly? Are animals going to be able to adapt their behaviors and to adapt their constructions and build things that are proper and that are adequate for the new types of environments and challenges that they will be facing? So yeah, nest architecture is linked to climatic environment. So I showed you the very broad analysis across the species, and now a smaller analysis within one single species. And this could be important in future responses to changes in weather and in our climate. And just to end, I would like to show you some nests, some real nests that I have down here. But to lead to that, I'm going to ask you a last question. I'm going to show you a nest, and I'm going to ask you to please try to answer in the poll. What nest do you think who is the owner of the nest, essentially? So I have this one here.
Okay. Very good. All right, I'll come back in.
Yes.
The polls are up. Okay, so with the first poll, we've got all three birds up on the screen, so we're trying to match which nest that one is from.
Who do you think that built this? Who's responsible for this?
Well, I don't know. I know it would have taken longer than an open one, though, because I've been listening. Yep.
True.
All right, so pop it in the chat, everyone. So the superb fairy wren, the weebill, or the grey fantail? Okay, poll is closed. Let's find out. Ooh, a little bit close. All right, 44% said it's the superb fairy wren, 36% said the weebill, and 21% said the grey fantail. A little bit of a range.
Interesting, yes. So you can see that this is a very, very small nest. And I told you that the weebill is the smallest bird in Australia. So the weebill is the responsible for this tiny little dome nest. This is my favorite nest. I think it looks like a little doll thing. I can't believe that a bird built this. But yeah, it's a weebill, and it's a very small domed nest. These were all collected in Canberra. But it's a very good guess, the fairy wren, because fairy wrens also build domed nests. Yeah. This one is from our field site, so one of the points that I showed you in that plot is this nest. And yeah, you can see that it also has a dome, but it's much, much bigger than this other little domed nest. And then the last one was this one. So this is the fantail nest.
Okay.
I actually lost its tail. A lot of times they have a little tail that is hanging from the nest, which is meant to camouflage the nest better and decrease the chances of getting eaten. But yeah, this is a little fantail nest, and you can see how they also use spider webs around just to make it really compact and nice. Yeah. And this last one is a willy wagtail nest. I didn't put it up there, but I showed you the video at the beginning. Just a much bigger type of cup nest.
Amazing.
Cool.
And I love how they use spider webs as well. That's using everything they can possibly find.
Yeah,
That's
they
incredible.
use kangaroo fur. They use whatever they can get.
Amazing. So resourceful. Fantastic. And that comes to the end of your presentation,
That
is
comes
that
to the
right?
end,
Amazing.
yes.
Thank you so much. It's so fascinating on something so incredible and something that we often see all around in trees and everything, and just finding so much more about it. I've heard very little about the dome ones, but obviously a lot more about the open nests myself, but maybe everyone's quite different.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. So we've got some time now, obviously, to do some questions, and we've got quite a few questions coming in already. So thank you everyone so much for sending those in. As they're coming in, I might just ask you one just to start off with, and just to wait for more to come in, but love to hear a little bit more about sort of how you came to be interested in this particular area, and then we can go from there.
Yes. So I think just from seeing them in the field, you know, you get to see like face to face something like that, and the process of building a nest, and then it just, you know, blows my mind to think that a tiny little animal can go back and forth and finish something. It's like they have a project and then they finish it. I worked with these thornbills, and one of my experiments was making little windows to increase the amount of light to see if they could, you know, get rid of the parasite egg. And I would open the windows, and the couple, or the owners of the nest, would just come in hours and just fix the nest. And again, and I would try again, and they would come and fix it. So they put a lot of effort into it, and yeah, I just think it's beautiful and it's interesting, and yeah, and I love thinking about it.
Absolutely, we're clearly so passionate about it. And that's amazing. I'm just going to jump to Emily's question right at the bottom, most recent question, because she just asked, how long did your PhD take? So just, I guess, to round out some of your background questions before we jump into a few more bird nesting.
Yes, I think I took 4 years. Yeah. So in Australia, they're a bit shorter than in the US, because it's more, you know, research intense. So yeah, I think it took 4 years, 2012 to 2016. That's where I was.
Yep. Very good. Awesome. Okay, so on to a few other questions. Start off with a few pretty quick ones. So what's your favourite bird nest?
Oh, that's a good question.
It's a good question. There's so many different options.
I think it's actually the weevil.
Okay.
I just can't with this. It's too cute. I think this is my favorite one. Yeah,
love it.
Yeah.
And what about your favourite bird? Does that match the nest and the bird?
No, it doesn't. I think my favorite bird is a toucan from the Andes, where I'm from. Yeah, it's blue and beautiful, but they have boring nests. They nest in cavities. So yeah.
Okay, one or the other maybe. Okay, amazing. All right, on to another question from Beck. So how do periods of intense rain and floods impact the nests?
That is a really good question. They can have different impacts. So it would impact birds that lay their eggs on the ground. So if they build, there's actually fairy wrens sometimes build close to the ground, like quite close. So you can imagine like floods and things like that would impact the nests, the birds that are building close to the ground. But they can also impact the materials. So there's anecdotal evidence that willy wagtails, for example, if it's a very rainy season, a very rainy year, they would use more mud in their nests and things like that. So they can impact in different ways, but yeah, those building close to the ground, you know, would be in danger of just having, you know, losing their eggs just from being flooded inside.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you might have started to answer the next question, actually. We've got from Lalitha, thank you. So do the same species use the same things to build their nest? And so I guess maybe you've started to say that things might change depending on the weather. And what do they use to build their nests? I guess so it's both
yes.
things. Yeah, I mean, I guess you spoke about the spider webs as well.
Yeah,
so it's amazing.
So they can use different things in the fairy wrens. So we've been seeing that some females actually start using wool if they are closer to, you know, sheep and things like that. So there's flexibility in the materials that birds use, and it's essentially what they can find. There's studies that have shown that through the years there's been more use of just human like garbage and things like that, like putting them in the nest. There's really cool studies from America, from Mexico, showing how some birds have even used the cigarette butts actually in the nests, and they can, in fact, be beneficial because they can decrease the amount of parasites in the chicks. So there's a lot of interesting studies around that and what birds bring into their nests.
Fascinating benefits of that. Okay, very unexpected.
Yeah.
That's great. Here's another really great question. So in terms of, I guess, applying what we know to maybe a bit more of a human context. So are there any techniques or materials that birds use that human architects should or could or have copied to improve our buildings?
Yes, there is some inspiration. So there is a very big stadium in, I can't remember where in Asia, that it's called the bird nest. So it's based, on the architecture of a bird nest. There's seats. I've seen seats that look like weaver nests as well. So there's a bit of inspiration. In terms of the weaving and the materials, I'm not sure. I haven't read much about it, but it's a great question. Yeah, I imagine, there's so much that we don't know still of how they stick things together and stuff like that, there could be potential to learn something from that as well.
No doubt, no doubt. The animal world's very, very smart. Okay, one from Michael. So do academic researchers take into consideration a detrimental effect on low population species from the collection of their nests?
Oh no, I should. This is a great question. Thank you for asking that. So we would never collect the nests if they are being used. So what happens, after the birds fledge is when, after a little while after that happens, then we go and collect the nest that is not being used at all by the female. So, this is fairy wrens. So we are very careful and we go through a very, long and strict process of animal ethics and all this. Like we would never interfere with the populations. And actually we keep track of the populations to make sure that they are, stable and going well. So this doesn't affect at all the birds. They never get to see what we are actually doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good to clarify, and thank you for the question,
Yes.
Michael. Maria actually has a question about this as well, just in terms of how you do get the nets. So do you want to just maybe talk through, I guess, what you do in the field when you're actually collecting them?
Yes, so this is a lot of using binoculars. And this is, I should say also, this is students and field assistants, the main ones. I don't get to go into the field as much these days, but it is really observing them. So the birds in the Canberra population that we use, because they are being monitored, they are tagged, many of them, so they have tags to be able to track how long they are living for and things like that. And then they just locate the nest, so you can find a nest by just looking at the behavior of the female. They start carrying things, and you can see, from very far away where they are building the nest. And from that behavior as well, then you can see when they are done and the chicks have fledged, and then, after a little while, we go in and then we collect the nest. We actually take some measures of the nest in there, so we measure the temperature and things like that inside, the location where the nest is, and that's why we know that birds don't really come back there. And then after a little while, we collect it and we take it to the lab and we measure it and do all those things.
Amazing. Great to hear all that. So Emily's got another question, a cockatoo fan perhaps. So what are cockatoo nests like, she asks?
Yes, so they use hollows in trees. That's why big trees are really, really important for birds, because all their big trees are usually the ones that have big hollows for things like cockatoos, so they build in trees,
Amazing. Emily's got another question, and this is a back-to-back question. So thank you, Emily. We've got lots of questions coming in, but this is a great one. So do bird nests vary significantly season to season? I guess for the same species, I guess she's asking. And have any cultures used the shape and size of nests to predict the type of weather expected that season? Very specific question.
Wow.
I know, I like this.
Yeah.
Good question.
I can't think of an example right now, but I don't I think there, like if I looked, I would be able to find something like that. But yeah, not at the moment. But yeah, like they will, you know, like what I was saying about willy wagtails, like just having nests with more mud in the rainy seasons and things like that. I imagine, you know, there could be changes, especially with the amount of water around them. Yeah, to what they incorporate into the building.
Amazing. I've got another question from Maria, and the question is plastic used in nests recently? But I think we can probably expand on that just to think about if there's more, and I guess to the cigarette butt comment that you made as well, like what other sort of more man-made materials are sort of being incorporated now? Have you seen a trend to moving different materials?
So there was Dominique. She did a very cool study where she looked at specimens from museums and tried to track the use of plastic. Pretty sure from decades ago to now, and yes, it has increased the use. So they sadly, especially those that are closer to cities and things like that, they would start using more things like plastic into their nest, which is really sad. Yeah.
Or resourceful? I don't know.
I don't know, I mean, I don't know if there's any studies showing that that's detrimental, but you can sort of imagine that it would be, Yeah,
not great. Okay, back to a few more sort of quick ones. So is it usually the male or female that build the nests?
Yes, so it's usually a female. It's usually a female. There's a lot of species where it's said that it's both of them, but the description says the female builds while the male sinks. So the male is there, but it's not there, it's not really doing the hard work. Or like they would bring materials and then the female is the one that would build. So contribution of the male varies, but it's mostly just the females,
Okay. And one from Susan. So what birds build the biggest nests? Competition focused, Susan, I get it. What's the biggest one?
I can tell you that lyrebirds build the biggest domed nest. So they have a huge dome nest that is usually on the ground. It's really, really big, and it has a roof and everything, which is unusual because the birds that build nests with roofs are usually smaller. It takes more material and stuff like that. So the lyrebird would build a very big dome of platforms. I mean, it's very hard to answer because there's also like these social nests where there is like tons, but they are collapsed like next to each other from weavers and things like this. So it's a hard question to answer.
Interesting though, the biggest one. I'll throw another one out there. What about the most unique bird's nest you've seen? Maybe the materials, maybe it's the shape.
Yes. One that comes to mind is a tailor bird. So they use their beak. This is in Borneo and Southeast Asia. They would use their beak to sort of saw like leaves and try to make like at least one side of the nest is that's why it's called a tailor bird essentially, because they use their beak to saw and that's how they make their nest, which is amazing.
Okay, rightio. I'd like to, we should find a photo of that.
I should have had
it. Amazing. Okay, a few more questions. There's so many questions coming in, everyone, so keep them coming. This is so fascinating. Okay, so Mel, has there been any research or observations from birds adapting nest building, say when there are high winds, storms, rains? Can nests be built under these conditions?
Well, I mean, there's birds that have to breed until under very extreme conditions. So there's definitely, birds that build in very, very cold conditions and would have like a dome, like pendulum tits, for example. They have like this dome that it's almost made of wool. Like it's really a really, really warm type of nest. So there's not tons that we know about, but there's definitely some birds building in extreme conditions that would, they would either like change the design of the nest or they would just try to find a very, a crevice or something that would protect the eggs and the chicks too. So it's a combination of the design with the location of the nest as well.
Yeah, okay. So they make it work.
Somehow.
So on a similar question, so Angela, Have you seen, or is there much research on climate effects on nests of more domestic and backyard birds? So thinking, I guess, the ones in the backyard, blackbirds, miners, honey eaters, wattlebirds. So is there much research on that in terms of their climate effects on their nests?
A lot of birds in our backyards are mainly birds that build open nests. So it is tricky because there's not much they can do with an open nest. So I don't think there's much research going on in that sense, but maybe in the way that they choose habitat and sites to place their nests, that becomes really important for these types of birds. But yeah, like in terms of studies that have done, I can't really think of any at the moment. I mean, there's evidence of blackbirds changing the amount of lining. So you know how birds, put fur and feathers and things to make it really soft for the eggs. That amount of lining changes depending on how cold the environment is. They've shown in blackbirds.
Yeah.
But that's in Europe, I think. Yeah. But here I can't think of any. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, we've got another one about, I guess, the response, but more frequent bushfires. So obviously, that's going to be quite detrimental to the trees and foliage. Is there much adaptation to their nests in response or to the threat, I guess, of bushfires?
Yeah. I think the main thing with the fires is really the habitat. Like the habitat is so fundamental for birds to be able to build, so to find a location that is suitable, right? So that there is cover, that they can hide their nests from predators, but also that they can find enough material to build. So you can imagine how anything that affects that habitat can just, destroy any chances of them being able to breed properly. So yeah, that's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one from Emily, and I like this question actually because I want to ask it too. So do piled nests, like bush turkeys' nests, count as nests? I know they're called that, but it's definitely not one of the options. So this is a great question. And is there any architecture to their building, or is it completely random, like it might look like to us?
It looks very random. I would say it counts as a nest. Like they put things, right, like to cover the eggs and things like that. But I don't know of any studies. So there's studies that have found how they don't need to incubate because the material is just rotting there and generating heat from that process, which is super interesting. But yeah, I don't know if anyone has studied the actual architecture or perhaps things related to the amount of material that is needed for that process to happen, and whether they make decisions on how much they will need to put on and to have in general. But yeah, it's a very interesting consideration.
Very much, Emily. It feels like that might be a good question for you to start to investigate. I think I'd love to know the answer to that too. Okay, a bit more of a human-bird interaction. So if humans interfere when birds are building nests, how do the birds react? And I guess and also, what do we do? Like, is it best to avoid, I would assume, but what would you say about that?
Yes, completely. So it depends on the species, but in general, as a rule, you shouldn't come anywhere close to a bird that is nesting. First, they might attack you like a magpie, right? So that when it's the swooping season. But also they might abandon the nest as well. So that's a risk, and that's the reason why all these things that we do is just looking at them with binoculars from far away. So we try to not come anywhere near the nest while they are in that process, because some species are really shy about it, and they would just abandon the nest if you come too close. So definitely don't try any of those things, putting your hands inside a nest or anything like that. Like that's what I showed you, was for my research for my PhD. And it was approved by ethics and all these things, and we were making sure that this wouldn't cause abandonment in that species. So there's a whole line of things that you need to go through before getting anywhere close to the nest. This is something that we contemplate from far away.
Absolutely, yeah. Well said. Okay, a few more questions. We've got a little bit of time left. So Kerry So when we're installing nest boxes, so once again, I guess bringing birds into the area. So when we install nest boxes, how important is it to know that the habitat is suitable to support higher populations? I guess so welcoming the birds into the area, she means. Or are other species negatively impacted? Okay, so I guess what the effect of nest boxes are and I guess putting in a human intervention into which birds are welcomed into a certain area.
Yeah, that's a good point. It depends. Like some birds will not use nest boxes, so it has to be targeted towards the right species, and then you need to think as well about the type of nest box, so the thermal properties of the box, if it's what the species needs and things like that. So yeah, I think it is a good idea, especially for cavity nesters, right? Like they need, if there's not enough habitat with 3 holes, they need that. So but yeah, it has to be well designed, and it has to be I mean, there's things that you can not ensure, right? Like you might design a box for birds, but it ends up being used by ring-tailed possums. So there's stuff that you can't control. So, but I think the intention is good, and it theoretically it should work and be good, yeah, for the birds.
Okay, positive result, very good. One from Maria, a few more from Maria. This is great. So, how do introduced Indian miners affect eggs and nests? And I guess maybe introduced species in general, and I guess the effect of that on the native birds.
I mean, the effect might not be directly on the eggs and the nests, right? But it's more through competition for food. So if they are very forceful competitors, then there might just be less food for fledglings then. In that sense, so it can affect the populations. But it's about the nest itself, I don't think there should be really any direct effects on the nest building process, unless there's very restricted habitat and things like that. But in general, it should be okay, at least for the birds that build something, that build a structure.
Very good. Okay, I think we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Do many birds reuse nests or recycle nest materials?
Some birds do. It is very hard to know how common that is.
Okay.
Willy wagtails, they do sometimes pick, after when they are building, like if a nest fails or something and they are building the nest very close in time to this, then they would grab a few materials and use that. It's very rare that they reuse the same nest. Like we haven't really seen that in the field. They just build, and what's interesting with thornbills, they would build a whole new nest, but right next to the previous one. So they like the territory, but they build a new thing. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. It's all just part of the process.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, awesome. Well, I think we've almost run out of time now. So maybe I'll have one final question and just thinking about, I guess, what's next for you in terms of looking ahead and what's your next step in the research that you're doing?
Yes, so we've been finding really interesting things with the population of fairy wrens in Canberra. So I think we just want to really understand a lot more of those decisions of how females decide to build a bigger nest or a smaller nest, and if it's related to the age of the female, things like that. Just trying to understand much better where that variation comes from, and whether it's really linked to climate and in response to changes in climate, I suppose.
Yeah, incredible. Well, very exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I think that basically brings us to the end.
Awesome.
But thank you so much for sharing all your work. It's absolutely fascinating, and clearly so many people are so interested in it. So thank you everyone for all your amazing questions. I know we're having a few issues with the chat in this Zoom meeting, but yeah, you all figured it out and put all your questions in the Q&A. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us. So the Science Festival Masterclasses will continue to be held throughout the week. If you want to attend another session, make sure you register via the link which will be on the website because the chat's having issues. So please go to the website, the Science Festival website. We've got 3 more to go for the rest of the week. And tomorrow, it'll be at 10:30 and we'll be at our Creswick campus. And for burning lessons from country ancient and new understanding of bushfires. I'm getting the call out. Thanks so much, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow.